The following content is a narrated account intended for storytelling and discussion.
Hi, welcome to our channel where we share the most intriguing stories. When Liam returned to his family ranch in Texas, he expected dust, sweat, and old memories, not war with a power-hungry HOA queen. What began with a fake sign turned into a battle of drones, forged documents, and fire. This isn't just a land dispute, it's a stand for legacy. When I first rolled back into Texas Hill Country, it was just shy of 7 in the morning, and the summer heat was already beginning to chew the air like a slow, humid beast. My wife, Rachel, was in the passenger seat, balancing a lukewarm gas station coffee, and our 2 kids were snoring in the back like a pair of tranquilized raccoons. As the truck bumped over the last hill and I caught sight of the ranch, 6,000 acres of stubborn, sun-drenched legacy, something in my chest clicked into place. Not nostalgia exactly, more like obligation laced with reverence. Granddad had called me 4 weeks prior. Well, technically he didn't call. He texted, "Knee got opened. Need you. Bring tools. Jay." That was Grandpa John. No small talk, no pleasantries, just war vet code, all business. I didn't hesitate. The man had raised me like a second father after my dad passed. So, after a decade of city life in Austin, managing builds for high-rise condos and office parks, I packed up the family and headed back to the only place in the world where land still looked you dead in the eye. Pulling through the familiar oak-lined path that led toward the main house, I felt that old tension, not anxiety, just alertness. This wasn't suburbia. This was land that had teeth, and if you didn't respect it, it would swallow you whole. We parked beside the barn, and before I even got the engine off, Rachel said, "What's that sign?" I turned and stared through the windshield. "You are now entering HOA Sycamore Heights. Authorized access only." It wasn't there last time I visited, which had been 2 years ago. The sign looked like something printed for a luxury gated community, glossy metal mounted on a steel post and hammered directly into our gravel driveway. Rachel raised an eyebrow. "This part of your family ranch belonged to an HOA now?" I laughed, out loud, a deep, incredulous bark. "No," I said, already unbuckling. "It absolutely does not." I grabbed a pair of fencing gloves from the truck bed, yanked the damn sign out of the dirt, post and all, walked 20 feet to the old fire pit near the barn, and tossed it in like it was infected. It took a few matches, some cardboard, and maybe more cussing than strictly necessary, but I made sure that sign ended up in glowing, righteous ashes. That was my first day back. Granddad John was already on the porch when I came up to the house, balancing his bulk on a wooden cane like it was an extension of his spine. His knee was freshly operated on and wrapped in a compression brace that peeked out from under his jeans. But his eyes, sharp, steady, viper-level aware. "Did you see that crap?" I asked him, still brushing soot off my hands. He nodded once. "She finally did it." "She? Who?" "Karen McClellan," he said, like it was a name made of battery acid. "President of Sycamore Heights, HOA. Moved in 6 years ago. Got herself a little empire over there." He jerked his cane vaguely southeast. I knew the place. Used to be bank land that went belly up after the housing crash. Some developer had picked it up cheap and put up a bunch of identical luxury homes with matching mailboxes, identical shrubs, and walkable paths made for people who fear dirt. "She's been pushing boundaries," he said. "Literally. You remember that gravel road that runs down toward the old well? It's the only drivable access road east out of this place." "Yeah, what about it?" "She wants it." I stared at him. "Not just that," he added. "She wants the land around it too. Claims it's all part of some revised development map. County hasn't confirmed a damn thing, but she's got City Hall pals, and she's loud. And the sign? New tactic. Passive aggression, with sprinkles of trespassing. Why didn't you call someone?" He snorted. "What do you think I'm doing now? Bringing you here." Fair enough. The next morning, we'd barely finished breakfast, Granddad chewing bacon like it owed him money, Rachel sipping coffee on the porch, when we heard tires crunching over gravel. 3 SUVs rolled up in perfect HOA formation. Front vehicle matte black, second gray, third white. They stopped 10 feet from the porch. Doors opened. Out stepped Karen, mid-50s tailored beige pantsuit, red lacquered nails, short helmet blonde hair that didn't move even when the wind kicked up. She was followed by a guy in a navy suit carrying a leather folio and a scrawny dude hauling a drone case like it was a sacred artifact. Karen climbed halfway up the steps without being invited. "Good morning, Mr. Rogers." I smiled politely. "Which one of us?" "There's two." She gave me that thin, practiced HOA smile, the kind that says, "I will destroy your soul, but I'm legally required to say hello first. I'm here on behalf of Sycamore Heights HOA regarding your property registration status. According to the new county boundary revisions, this parcel may fall under shared infrastructure jurisdiction. We'd like to process a re-registration and invite you to join our upcoming quarterly general ownership meeting." I blinked. "You're serious?" "Entirely. This land's been in my family since before Texas had pavement, and you want us to attend a homeowners meeting. We're offering proactive inclusion into a vibrant community of shared values and—" "Ma'am," I interrupted, "this ain't a TED Talk." The guy with the folio stepped forward. "If you'd like, we can walk through the paperwork. It's largely standard. Road easement clauses, maintenance contributions, fence uniformity." "Uniformity," I repeated. "You mean the white picket clones you got down that way?" Karen's smile tightened. "We're hoping to avoid escalation." I pointed behind them. "Then you might want to start by getting off our land." She gave me one last practiced stare, that HOA power trip expression you get when someone's used to steamrolling the weak. "We'll be in touch," she said. "I believe the sheriff may have jurisdictional clarity." The three of them climbed into their SUVs and pulled away with synchronized exhaust. Granddad let out a low whistle. "She brought the damn drone kid too. Jesus." "Don't worry," I said, watching the dust settle on the horizon. "She just declared war. She just doesn't know we've already been through worse." It was just past noon, 2 days later, when the sheriff showed up. Not the one I remembered. The old sheriff, Baker, used to ride out here once a year just to check on Granddad and drink a lukewarm beer on the porch. He'd tell stories about bar fights in Fredericksburg and how Granddad once knocked out a drunk with a pork rib. That man had a belly like a watermelon and hands like cedar logs. He was retired now. This new guy was fresh out the shrink wrap, maybe 30 buzz-cut wraparound shades, full-duty belt with everything short of a flamethrower strapped to his waist. He pulled up in a spotless county cruiser like he thought he was in a recruitment poster. I was tightening the tension wire on the north gate when I saw the flash of blue and white come down the drive. The kids were inside. Rachel was prepping lunch. I walked up slow, wiping my hands on a rag. The deputy, no, scratch that, he had sergeant bars, stepped out like he owned the place. "Afternoon," he said. "Something I can help you with, Sergeant?" "Dalton," he replied, flipping open a clipboard. "Got a notice here from the Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association concerning non-compliance with community regulations and unauthorized rejection of association membership." I stared at him. "Come again." "You've been issued a formal administrative warning regarding denial of participation in a recognized residential association. You're telling me I'm legally obligated to join a damn HOA?" He cleared his throat. "The paperwork claims this property now falls within new HOA jurisdiction per recent county planning board guidance." "You mean Karen gave you a map and you just rolled out here to hand me a notice?" "I'm just following procedure." "Let me see it," I said, holding out my hand. He hesitated, then passed me a stapled packet of bureaucratic nonsense filled with legal jargon, half of it sounding like it was printed off a Word template. I flipped through it and barked a short laugh. "Unauthorized decorative structures in public view. That's my barn. It's been here since 1898. Dalton shifted his weight. "Sir, this isn't a criminal matter. It's administrative." "Oh, well, thank God it's only absurd and not felonious." At that moment, I heard the porch door creak. Granddad was standing there in a flannel shirt, jeans, and a visible grimace from his bad knee. He leaned on his cane like it was an extension of the Second Amendment itself. "You got a warrant, son?" he called out. Dalton straightened up. "No, sir. Just delivering official notice." "Then you're trespassing," Granddad said calmly. "And possibly complicit in civil intimidation." "I'm not trying to intimidate anyone, sir." Granddad stepped down one step at a time, then explained something to me. "Exactly what statute am I violating by not joining a private neighborhood club run by a woman who's got more Botox than brain cells?" Dalton froze. "Like I said, "You're not answering the question," Granddad cut in. Tell me what state law mandates that land passed through 6 generations is now part of a cookie-cutter HOA just because some woman drew a crayon map and filed it with a buddy in the county office. Dalton looked increasingly uncomfortable. I almost felt bad for the guy. Almost. Granddad came to a stop in front of him. You got a court order? No, sir. Got a summons? No. Got anything that wasn't typed up on a desktop printer by a committee of lunatics? Dalton's jaw tightened. Sir, if you have issues, I suggest you consult legal counsel. I already did, Granddad said. And if you want to double check, you can call my lawyer. His name's Hank Miller, federal judge, my former squad mate in Da Nang. He'll be thrilled to explain to you what unlawful harassment looks like in a civil context. Dalton's posture shifted ever so slightly, less rigid, more cautious. I think I've done my part, he said, stepping back toward the cruiser. Be sure to let Karen know that if she wants to take our land, she better come with more than a clipboard and a haircut. Dalton left without another word. The silence afterward felt charged. Rachel came out onto the porch with a dish towel in her hands, her expression tight. They're escalating, she said. They're bluffing, I replied. So far. She handed me the mail, a thick manila envelope stamped with the county seal. Inside, a notice of civil filing. Karen had officially dragged us into court. Included in the packet was an exhibit, a revised HOA zoning map showing a massive boundary expansion that somehow managed to gobble up our entire eastern border. Accompanying it, a notarized document signed 5 years ago by someone named Gregory T. Murdoch, claiming to be the acting trustee of our property, which was news to us since no such person ever existed. Who the hell is Gregory T. Murdoch? Rachel asked. Apparently, I said, he's the guy who sold our land to the HOA without ever living here. Granddad chuckled darkly. Go selling land now. That's a new trick. I spent the next 3 hours on the phone. County clerk's office, property records, zoning board. Most of the people I talked to had never heard of this revised jurisdictional map. A few paused before answering like they'd just been handed a live grenade. And every time I said Sycamore Heights, the line went just a little colder. After dinner, Granddad and I sat outside watching the dusk settle in, fireflies blinking like lazy sentries across the fields. He sipped whiskey, and I nursed a beer. They're going to push this hard, I said. You sure you're up for a fight like this? He snorted. Son, I didn't get shot at by the Viet Cong just to let some suburban Napoleon carve up my land with an HOA newsletter. The next morning, I drove 2 hours into San Marcos to visit the county land records office, which, judging by the decor, hadn't been updated since the Ford administration. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like mosquitoes trapped in a bottle, and the scent of stale toner mingled with burnt coffee in the air. I was running on 4 hours of sleep, 3 cups of caffeine, and the slow-burning rage of a man who just discovered someone forged a signature to steal 6,000 acres of land that had been in his family since Lincoln had a pulse. I walked up to the front counter with the manila envelope from the court filing in one hand and a GoPro clipped inside my jacket. I'd seen too many HOA horror stories online to trust anything without a backup recording. The clerk at the desk was a pale, twitchy guy in his 20s who looked like he spent more time playing Dungeons and Dragons than reading zoning law. His name tag read Kyle. Morning, I said, looking for property records associated with parcel ID TX. That's the Rogers Ranch. He gave me a quick, polite nod and started typing. Need to see all documents filed in the past 10 years. Especially any deeds of trust, zoning changes, or third-party authorizations. His fingers stopped. His jaw twitched. One moment, sir. He got up and walked through a back door labeled Authorized Personnel Only. I waited and waited. After 5 full minutes, I leaned over the counter and caught sight of his silhouette through the frosted glass, hunched over a file cabinet like he was defusing a bomb. When he came back, he was pale, paler than before. In his hands was a navy blue folder. No markings, no case number, just a fat rubber band holding it closed like it was radioactive. He set it on the counter, then hesitated. I'm going to need you to submit a formal records request for this file, he said. It's flagged for internal audit. Internal audit? Why? He blinked fast. I'm not authorized to say. I took a slow breath, leaned in just slightly. Kyle, buddy, I'm not here to cause trouble. But someone used a forged trust document to annex my family's land into an HOA. A guy named Gregory T. Murdoch, who, according to all known reality, does not exist. He didn't respond. You ever read Orwell, Kyle? He shifted. I don't really read fiction. This isn't fiction. I tapped the folder. This is the part where you decide if you want to be the clerk who helped cover up a land theft or the guy who helped expose one. He swallowed. Look, they told us not to release anything without going through Karen's nephew. He's the county liaison for Sycamore Heights. Of course he was. Can I look at the file? I asked. I'm not allowed to hand it over, but he opened it. Just enough for me to see what was inside. There it was. A series of zoning overlays stamped with Karen's signature and a list of properties marked in green highlighter. Ours was front and center. And then, taped to the inside cover, a scan of a notarized document from 5 years ago, bearing the forged signature of a Gregory T. Murdoch as acting trustee of Hillview Agricultural Estates Trust. It even had a fake phone number and a Shell LLC address in El Paso. I pulled out my phone and started filming, slowly, subtly, catching enough angles to confirm what I was seeing. Kyle flinched but didn't stop me. I need a copy, I said. I can't give you one. Then keep this safe. Audit or not, this file disappears and there'll be hell to pay. On the way out, I emailed the footage to myself, Rachel, and a backup email I hadn't used since college. Then I drove straight to the office of a contact Granddad had given me, a retired military friend named Ray Grissom, who now ran a small legal defense firm focused on property rights. The place looked like a converted bait shop, but inside it smelled like printer ink and old coffee, which meant lawyers were definitely present. Ray was a big man, slow to speak, but fast to understand. When I showed him the footage, he didn't blink. This is enough to get an injunction started, he said. At the very least, it'll force the court to pause HOA claims on your land. Will it stop Karen? He laughed. Hell no, but it'll piss her off something fierce. While Ray got to work filing motions, I headed back to the ranch. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something gnawed at me. Something about that kid with the drone from the first visit. I pulled up his image on the porch camera. The case he carried had a label, Falconair Vision Systems. Quick Google search. Turns out Falconair was a drone subcontractor based in Fort Worth, specialized in HOA compliance enforcement, which, translated from bureaucrat into English, meant they flew drones to spy on residents and issue fines for having wrong-colored window shutters or hanging wind chimes too loud. According to their site, all drone activity required consent forms signed by participating members. We were never members. I dug into FAA policy. Flying drones over non-consenting private property without cause. Federal violation. The next morning, I bought a $50 drone net off Amazon, set up motion alerts around the perimeter, and left my phone volume on high. Rachel thought I was being paranoid, but Granddad just handed me an old Remington and said, "Don't miss." 3 days later, the drone came back. It flew low, slow, and loud enough to wake the damn cows. This time, I was ready. Net launcher in hand, I stepped out onto the porch, tracked it across the east field, and fired. The net caught one of its rotors. The thing spiraled like a drunk duck and slammed into the mud by the old water tank. The next morning, while Granddad and the kids made pancakes, I sat in the barn with the screwdriver and opened the casing. Inside, a micro SD card. On it, a folder titled Rogers Infractions. Inside the folder were dozens of aerial images. Our sheds, tractors, even the backyard where the kids played. Some were tagged with notes. Visible livestock from road, non-compliant. Unpainted fencing. No white border. Trash receptacle visible on Wednesday, non-compliance day. I stared at the list. This wasn't surveillance. It was prep for legal ambush. And Karen was treating us like we were already hers. Not today. It was just after 2 in the morning when the first drone leaflets hit the porch. I heard them before I saw them. A soft, repetitive flapping like someone shaking out wet laundry. I grabbed my flashlight, stepped outside, and found a pile of glossy HOA-branded flyers scattered across the steps. They were still warm from the printer, smelling like plastic and fresh toner. Registration past due. Join Sycamore Heights show to avoid escalation. Failure to install standardized white fencing will result in compliance fees. All livestock must be out of sight from shared easement roads. HOA Code 17.2b. Each one more absurd than the last. I wasn't sure whether to laugh or start digging a trench around the property. I looked up. The sky was clear. No drone in sight, but I knew it had been there. The bastards had dropped propaganda from the air like we were in some HOA-themed version of Apocalypse Now. Inside, I woke Rachel. She sat up fast, still half dreaming. "What is it?" she whispered. I held up a leaflet. "We're being bombed." She blinked, looked at it, and swore. Loudly. By morning, the entire gravel driveway looked like a war zone of leaflets. I collected every last one, burned them in the same fire pit where I'd torched the entrance sign, then took the kids to their aunt's place in Kerrville. Whatever this thing was turning into, I didn't want them in the crossfire. That afternoon, I did what any engineer raised on Texas soil would do. I fortified. I upgraded our motion-triggered cameras, installed trail cams in the trees, and even wired a drone snare net between two oaks near the back fence line. I wanted video. I wanted evidence. I wanted a damn scalp. That night, around 3:30, the bastard came back. I was awake in the living room, half dozing in the recliner with a loaded pellet rifle across my lap when the cameras chimed. I watched the live feed as a quadcopter buzzed over the eastern ridge, dipped low over the old cattle shed, then circled back over the house. I grabbed the rifle, ran outside barefoot, and sprinted across the dew-wet grass toward the net. It took the bait. The net snapped tight and yanked the drone out of the air with a satisfying thwip, like a mousetrap snapping shut on a cockroach. It fell into the brush with a sad little whir. By sunrise, I had the drone gutted on the workbench like a field-dressed deer. Inside, same deal as the last one, micro SD card. But this time, the folder wasn't just images. There were spreadsheets, folders labeled by property address, notes on owners, entry points, animal types, even one labeled non-compliant political signage. One file had a checklist. Rogers Ranch, target priority, high resistance potential, document early, test boundaries, push for easement dispute, assess for forced compliance lawsuit. This wasn't surveillance, this was strategy. I copied the files, backed them up twice, and locked the drone and SD card in Granddad's gun safe. And then I drove to Sycamore Heights. I didn't call. I didn't make an appointment. I didn't bring a lawyer. I walked straight into the HOA office, a smug little one-story brick building that looked like it was built to enforce curfews on squirrels, carrying the drone like a war trophy under my arm. The receptionist looked up with a plastic smile. "Do you have an appointment?" I dropped the drone on the desk with a solid thunk. "Tell Karen we need to talk." She opened her mouth to respond, then closed it again as Karen herself emerged from a side room, heels clicking like gunshots. She stopped when she saw me. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" "I brought one of your birds back," I said. "He got tired, forgot his mission." "I have no idea what you're talking about." "Oh, really?" I said, popping the SD card from my pocket and tossing it on the counter. "Because this says you're flying drones over private land without consent, collecting surveillance, violating FAA regulations, and attempting to coerce landowners into illegal annexation schemes." Her lawyer stepped out behind her, hair slicked, tie straight, soul empty. "If you're making accusations, Mr. Rogers, we'll need to see. Already sent copies to the FAA, the county commission, and my attorney. This one's just for you. Keepsakes." Karen's smile twitched. "You think this makes you look smart?" "No," I said. "It makes you look federal crime dumb." I turned to leave, then paused. "Oh, and next time you send a drone near my kids, it won't be a net waiting for it." I didn't look back. That night, we received a letter taped to the porch, unsigned, printed in Times New Roman 14 dot font like a fake ransom note. "The HOA is coming. Comply or move." Granddad read it, lit a cigar, and used the letter to spark the tip. "I remember when threats came with bullets, not fonts," he muttered. We sat in silence for a while. Then I said, "They're going to keep pushing." He nodded. "Good. So will we." The construction crew showed up just after sunrise. Big diesel trucks, orange vests, and a bulldozer that looked like it had just come off a prison chain gang. They didn't even try to be sneaky about it. One of the trucks backed up right across the cattle gate, beeping loud enough to wake half the valley. Dust kicked up like fog, and before I even had my boots on, the sound of metal teeth biting into earth echoed across the east road. I stumbled outside, shirtless and pissed, shouting over the ruckus. "Hey! What the hell do you think you're doing?" A man with a clipboard turned around. He had the look of someone who dealt with too many porta potties and not enough unions. "Temporary grading and drainage installation," he yelled back. "Authorized by HOA Infrastructure Maintenance Clause. You're on private land, genius." He barely looked up. Sir, please contact your HOA representative if you have concerns. I don't have an HOA. He shrugged and waved toward the bulldozer, which was already carving a shallow ditch parallel to the road, the only damn road leading in or out of the ranch. I grabbed my phone and started filming, narrating every detail like a true citizen of the 21st century. By the time I reached the ditch, the bulldozer had already cut through a quarter-mile stretch of gravel. They'd even placed temporary signs. Caution, infrastructure work ahead, CHO oversight. Granddad emerged a few minutes later, pulling on his boots one step at a time, knee brace creaking, jaw clenched so tight I thought he might grind teeth into dust. Did they touch the road? He asked. They're trenching it, I said. Drainage, supposedly. His mouth twisted. Drainage my ass. They're building a damn moat. We tried calling the sheriff's office, but the dispatcher put us on hold for 12 minutes, then told us we needed to resolve boundary disputes through civil channels. Civil channels, that's what they called it now. Rachel started making calls. Lawyers, news outlets, even some environmental oversight boards. Meanwhile, I walked the entire trench and took photos of everything. The worst part wasn't just the mess. It was that they dug it deep enough to flood in the rain. If we got even 2 inches of water, that road would turn into a swamp. That afternoon, I saw the same clipboard guy sitting in his truck, eating a gas station sandwich like he'd just finished saving the world. I walked over and tapped on his window. He rolled it down with the lazy confidence of someone who thought liability insurance was a shield. You got a permit for this? Talk to the HOA, man. You got a name? He held up the sandwich. I got lunch. He rolled the window back up. So I called an old contact of mine, Cheryl, freelance journalist with an attitude problem and zero fear of litigation. We met in Austin years ago when she covered a commercial development I was managing. She'd done pieces on environmental fraud, zoning corruption, and once got chased by a mayor's nephew for filming a septic tank spill behind a golf course. By sundown, she was on our porch with a GoPro, a mic, and a gleam in her eye. Karen McClellan, she said, flipping through a printout. President of Sycamore Heights HOA, sued 3 times in 5 years for overreach. Fined by the state in 2022 for zoning tampering in Harris County. And currently on the board of a shell pack with exactly 1 donor, a land brokerage company based in Dallas. I grinned. You brought receipts. Always do. The next morning, we held a press conference, not in a hotel ballroom, not in some downtown courthouse, right on the gravel road beside the trench with a folding table, a hand-painted sign that said, "We don't negotiate with neighborhoods," and 3 lawn chairs stolen from the back porch. Cheryl filmed everything. Granddad opened the event with a slow, steady speech that started like a whisper and ended like a sermon. I've protected this land with my hands, my rifle, and my patience. We've outlived droughts, floods, and greedy men with fancier shoes than sense. But this, he pointed to the trench, this is cowardice hiding behind policy. Then he paused and said, just loud enough for the cameras. An HOA ain't the law. And it sure as hell ain't the people. Behind him stood 3 other veterans from the area, men who'd served with him, aged but proud, wearing faded caps and steel stares. That video went viral in less than 24 hours. Comments poured in. Shares exploded. And Cheryl? She dropped the raw footage to every local station and 1 national platform. By noon, a second journalist, Gina Scott from News, reached out for an on-camera interview. She arrived that evening with a full crew, but after the story aired, something shifted. 2 days later, Cheryl called me from a payphone. A payphone. They're watching me, she said. 2 SUVs parked outside my apartment 2 nights in a row. My neighbor says someone asked about my work schedule. That same night, our mail arrived torn open. 1 envelope had the words, "You're next," scribbled on the back. Rachel found it first. She didn't speak for a minute, just stared. I started sleeping with a loaded shotgun under the bed. We filed a police report. The officer barely concealed his apathy. "It's probably just a prank," he said. But the look in his eyes said something else. They didn't want this getting any louder. Too late. The fire started with the smell, not the kind of smell you notice immediately. This was subtle at first, synthetic, faintly chemical, drifting through the open window while I sat on the porch nursing a cup of lukewarm coffee and trying to convince myself I wasn't afraid to sleep anymore. Then the smoke came. It curled over the ridge behind the barn like a lazy ghost, dark and greasy, dragging the scent of burning plastic. I was on my feet in an instant, running barefoot across the gravel, heart punching my ribs. The old ATV battery pile, tucked behind the storage shed, was engulfed. Granddad was already there, fire extinguisher in one hand, metal cane in the other like he was ready to duel the damn flames. We got it out fast, but not before the siding on the barn had warped and the dry grass along the fence line blackened. No note, no symbol, but the message was clear. We called it in. The sheriff's department sent out one officer, a new guy, wide-eyed and clearly uncomfortable being anywhere more rural than a bookie's. He took photos, nodded a lot, scribbled on a clipboard, and left without asking the obvious question, why would someone set fire to a battery pile? We didn't get an answer. We got silence. The next morning, Cheryl showed up looking like she hadn't slept either. "They're going after reporters now," she said, slamming her car door hard enough to rattle the windows. She handed me a thumb drive. "Gina's car got torched. Parking lot behind the station. Fire marshal says it was accidental wiring failure. Totaled right after she aired your story." I stared at the drive in my hand. "What's on this?" "Everything we've got. Videos, drone files, witness interviews, the zoning map revisions, the land transfer forgeries, all of it. Plus backup to 2 encrypted clouds. If anything happens to me, you keep this moving." I nodded, but there was something else in her face. Something different this time. "You thinking of pulling out?" I asked. She hesitated just long enough to answer the question without saying it out loud. "Let me know if they show up again," she said instead. "I'm changing motels every night, wearing a damn wig now." That afternoon, I got a call from Ray Grissom, our property lawyer. "Liam," he said, "you sitting down?" "Should I be?" "There's a new motion filed by Sycamore Heights legal team. They've petitioned for an emergency injunction to seize temporary maintenance control of the gravel road based on infrastructure hazard. If they get it, they can claim the right to maintain, grade, and restrict traffic for safety. They're trying to make it look like we're a public liability." Yep, and they've attached a dozen fabricated complaints from supposed HOA members citing neglected livestock, noxious smells, and dangerous soil erosion. I took a deep breath. They're building a case. They're building a trap. That night, I walked the entire property boundary with a flashlight. Just me, the frogs, and a growing sense that this wasn't about property anymore. This was about who got to say no. I didn't sleep. At 7 the next morning, we got a knock at the door. Not Karen, not the sheriff. 2 men in suits, one gray, one navy, flashed badges too quick for comfort, and introduced themselves as investigators from the state attorney general's office. "We received a package," the older one said. Anonymous. Contained what appears to be evidence of systematic zoning fraud and document forgery tied to multiple parcels of land, including yours. "Anonymous," I said. The younger agent pulled out a copy of one of Cheryl's videos, the one with Granddad standing in front of the trench like a Confederate general at Gettysburg. "She made it loud enough," he said. Somebody finally listened. They asked for copies of everything. I gave them 2 flash drives and a printed dossier I'd been updating every night like a psychopath. They left with serious faces and the kind of silence that only happens when people start to really believe you. By nightfall, word spread fast. Karen was being formally reviewed by the state ethics board. The press started whispering. The county clerk's office went dark. No calls, no emails. Kyle, the clerk who'd shown me the original file, sent me a single encrypted message. "They're shredding stuff." Rachel found 2 more envelopes taped to our mailbox the next day. One was blank, sealed with duct tape. Inside, a photo of our youngest son walking to the chicken coop. Someone had followed him. Close. The second was worse. It was a folded newspaper clipping, a 3-year-old article about a barn fire in Waco. A family had died in that one, the headline circled in red. That night, I moved the kids out for good. We packed the essentials. Rachel drove them to her sister's in San Angelo with a promise that I'd follow soon. I didn't follow. I stayed, because sometimes standing your ground means doing it alone, at least long enough to make sure no one else has to. The subpoena came at dawn, a crisp envelope left on the porch, weighed down by a smooth river stone. Subtle, almost polite, as if the state was saying, "We see you, we believe you. Now let's make this official. Inside, confirmation. The Texas Attorney General's office had launched a formal investigation into Sycamore Heights Homeowners Association. Karen McClellan, along with multiple board members and county zoning officials, was under scrutiny for fraudulent annexation, falsification of public documents, abuse of administrative power, and, cherry on top, attempted land theft. Ray called me 5 minutes later. He was laughing, not from joy, but in the way a tired soldier laughs when someone finally shows up with air support. "They're coming in hard," he said. "They raided the HOA office this morning, took every file, every server, even the framed motivational posters. What about Karen? She wasn't home when they got there, but don't worry, they'll find her." And they did. Turns out she'd skipped town sometime after midnight, packed light, left behind her car, caught on traffic cams headed west on I-10 toward New Mexico. She made it about 50 miles before a state trooper pulled her over for a routine stop. She went quietly, which disappointed me. I half expected her to scream about sovereign rights and invoke some HOA charter in Latin. I watched the arrest footage over black coffee, barely able to believe it was real. But justice wasn't just about Karen, it was about cleaning up the system she'd infected. Within hours of her arrest, her nephew, the zoning liaison, was placed on indefinite leave. His office was sealed off. Internal emails leaked to the press showed deliberate manipulation of zoning maps, backdated signatures, and confidential memos addressed to KM with subject lines like "next batch of targets" and "easement pressure tactics." Granddad stood by the fence that evening, arms crossed, as the news rolled across the radio. "She played Empire," he said. "Forgot the land remembers who really owns it." I stayed quiet. Part of me wanted to celebrate, to scream victory from the rooftops, but another part, the deeper, quieter part, just wanted it all to stop. And it wasn't over yet. 2 nights later, I was woken by headlights cutting across the window. Not trucks this time, not construction or county vehicles. Black SUVs, no markings, parked just outside the main gate. 3 of them. I grabbed the .45 caliber and crept out the side door. Granddad was already awake, sitting in the rocker, his own shotgun resting across his knees like an old friend. "I counted 6, he whispered, moving around the fence line. "Not law. Not press." I moved toward the back porch, flipped the switch for the floodlights. White beams exploded across the yard. Figures scattered. One slipped. Another raised what looked like a phone, possibly filming. Then they retreated. Silent. Quick. Like shadows with good funding. No attempt to enter, just a message. The next morning, we found the fence cut in 3 places. Not big, just enough to say, "We can get in anytime we want." That was the turning point. Not Karen's arrest, not the subpoenas, not the public disgrace. This coward's dance at the edge of the law, the final twitch of a dying scheme. I called Cheryl. She didn't answer. Her voicemail was full. I called Gina. "We've been pulled from the story," she said. "Station got warned about interference. Legal said we're to reallocate editorial bandwidth. Total BS." The press was backing off. The heat was spreading too far, too fast, but I wasn't going to stop. Not when I was this close. Ray and I met with the state investigators at a field office near Austin. I brought every document we had, backups of backups, drone footage, footage of the construction crews trespassing, the leaflets, the threats, everything. Ray laid it all out like a war map. The lead investigator, a woman named Trujillo, nodded as she flipped through it. She had the look of someone who didn't blink often and didn't care much for procedural theater. 22 properties across 3 counties, she said. Falsified integration into HOA jurisdiction. Coordinated paper trails. Targeting elderly landowners. It's a whole damn racket. "And you'll shut it down?" I asked. She looked up. "Already happening. But we want you to testify." "In court?" "In front of the state board. And likely in federal hearings. Your family's property is the strongest case, most documented, most violations. If we land this right, we can not only dissolve the HOA, we can charge them under RICO." My stomach dropped. RICO. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The same law used to take down mob families and drug cartels. Karen's little empire was about to be treated like organized crime. I said yes. Granddad gave me a firm handshake, followed by a rare hug. "Make 'em remember our name," he said, "like your great-grandmother did when she ran moonshine through those hills during Prohibition." I smiled. "Runs in the blood, huh?" "Damn right." As the sun set over the fields, we watched a hawk glide across the orange sky. No more drones, no more trenchers, just wind and time. The ground had finally gone still, but the fight, the real fight, was heading into courtrooms and government buildings, and I was ready. The courtroom smelled like polished wood and recycled air, that sterile, soulless atmosphere only government buildings can truly perfect. Everything was beige, the walls, the chairs, the mood, but at the center of it all sat a storm ready to break. My name was called. I stood, walked forward, took the oath with a steady voice and the weight of 6 generations pressing between my shoulder blades. The mic clicked on. State your name. Liam Rogers, and your relation to the property in dispute. I'm the legal co-owner and current resident of Rogers Ranch, Texas Hill Country, 6,000 acres passed down through my family since the 1870s. What brings you here today, Mr. Rogers? I glanced at the judge, then at the rows behind me. Investigators, legal teams, 2 reporters who hadn't bowed to pressure, and Granddad, seated tall in the front row, cane across his lap like a badge of office. What brings me here is a group of people who thought that land could be bought, bullied, or paper-clipped into submission. What brings me here is fraud, intimidation, and a woman named Karen McClellan who tried to turn a neighborhood association into a land-hungry machine. From there, I laid it all out. The fake documents, the forged trustee, the revised zoning maps, the trench, the drones, the surveillance, the threats. I spoke for nearly an hour, pausing only when the court clerk's pen couldn't keep up. When I was done, they called Cheryl. She wore her press badge like armor and walked with a limp. Apparently someone had slashed her tires 2 nights before, and she'd taken a fall while changing one in the rain. Didn't stop her. Her testimony was brutal, clear, and backed by timestamps, file trails, and a journalist's eye for exposing rot. Then came the surprise witness, Kyle, the zoning office clerk. He walked in with a duffel bag and the expression of a man with nothing left to lose. I started recording everything, he said, setting down the bag. Emails, calls, memos. They told us to bury the files, shred complaints, reroute inquiries. One time, I asked why a land parcel from a century-old family farm was listed under HOA development. Karen's nephew told me, and I quote, "Don't worry, old people die, land moves on." The silence in the courtroom was dead weight. That day changed everything. By the end of the week, Sycamore Heights HOA was officially dissolved by court order. All active board members were removed. Karen was indicted on 18 felony counts, including wire fraud, conspiracy, unlawful surveillance, tampering with government records, and civil rights violations. She pleaded not guilty. The trial was set for the following year. But the land, ours, untouchably, irrefutably ours. We held a barbecue the next Saturday, not to celebrate victory, but to celebrate survival. Granddad smoked 4 racks of ribs. Rachel made cornbread. Neighbors, veterans, ranchers, and even a couple of quiet bureaucrats showed up. Some brought pies, others brought bottles. All brought stories. Halfway through the afternoon, someone asked Granddad what he was going to do now that it was all over. He took a long drag from his cigar, pointed his cane toward the field, and said, "Same thing I always do. Keep this dirt honest." I never went back to Austin. Instead, I registered for the bar exam, passed it, and opened a small legal office out of the old equipment shed. Took down the rusty hay hooks, put up a fan, built a desk out of leftover pine. Called it Rogers and Soil, Property Defense Law. The first case I took was for a 70-year-old widow whose HOA fined her for having non-compliant roofing material. They sent her a notice in Comic Sans. I nearly framed it. We won. We kept winning. Sycamore Heights, that name doesn't exist anymore. The development restructured, renamed, and buried the HOA under layers of PR fluff. But people remember, especially the ones who testified, the ones who lost sleep, the ones who nearly lost their land. As for Karen, she got 18 years in federal prison. The sentencing judge, Judge Hank Miller, was a former squad mate of Granddad's and recused himself from the case, but not before giving a hell of a statement to the press. She didn't just break the law, he said. She tried to privatize democracy. Now the old HOA office stands boarded up, but not forgotten. We turned it into a public archive. Inside are boxes of evidence, testimony transcripts, maps, and a plaque over the door that reads, "Here lies the paperwork that almost stole Texas." And one last thing. At the end of the documentary a journalist aired a few months later, Granddad looked right into the camera, hat low, voice rough as cedar bark, and said, "Land ain't something you take with forms and fancy stamps. If you want my land, you best learn to plow it first." Cut to black.